guaranteed they're going to succeed in the passing game. If they fall behind early, Alfred Morris makes for a shaky start. I have him right as one of the last RB2s you can possibly look at. And if you've got an RB3 that might make you feel more safe, more comfortable, you can always plug him in over Morris. But look at Morris as no more than an RB2. I'm taking the Eagles on the road, and they've got one more game that they're going to need to put on under their belt, and I think they will, Keith.
The Cleveland Browns travel to the Carolina Panthers. The Browns sitting at 7-7 in a very tight AFC North with their brand spanking new quarterback. Say what you will about whether or not you think he's going to be successful. Last week was an abomination. The Carolina Panthers went out with their backup quarterback, Derek Anderson, and beat the Tampa Bay Bucks, albeit by 2 points, but when your backup comes in because your starting quarterback almost died in a car rollover, you'll take what you can get. Cam Newton's status is still up in the air, so it remains to be seen. I was really let down by the way the Browns' defense got shredded by Jeremy Hill last year. This is a game where I feel like if they are going to commit to the run because Derek Anderson is back there, the Panthers committing to the run, that is, Jonathan Stewart might be the back to tear him up. Because I don't know what happened to the Browns, but they just all of a sudden failed to execute. And I know their run defense was a little suspect, but I think they're a better unit than what they put out last week. Carolina's at home. Cleveland is a wild card now. All of a sudden, as far as what you're going to get out of them from week to week, I'm picking Carolina at home. I can't bet the road team on this one.
Yeah, Keith. Right now, I think the Panthers are very fortunate to be where they are, especially having lost Cam Newton last week for that game. I think it's incredible that he'll be making it back on the gridiron this week, and that should help them towards a win against a Browns team that, I forget what the adjective was that you used, but whatever it was, an exorcism, I think, is necessary there in Cleveland after that disgusting mess we saw out there by Johnny Manziel. And all that having been said, Cam Newton or Derek Anderson, whoever's starting over there, look at him no better than a high quarter or QB2 in two quarterback leagues. The Browns defense still does a pretty good job getting to the quarterback and defending the pass. Jonathan Stewart is the play in this game. When you go up against a team that's given up almost 140 rushing yards per game and almost 1 TD per game to the position, you got to like his chances. I like Kelvin Benjamin as a wide receiver too. I'm hopeful that he can punch one into the end zone. Same thing with Greg Olsen. Both Olsen and Benjamin should be started in your lineups if you have them. And if you're one of these persons that did happen to get into the championship by streaming defenses, look at that Panthers defense. I have them ranked number 12. I think that's a great spot for them. They've basically got the blueprint on how to handle Johnny Manziel vis-a-vis the Bengals, so they could just turn to that and just make it happen. For the Browns, Josh Gordon, wide receiver 2 this week. Since he's come back, he hasn't scored. He didn't do anything last week with Johnny Manziel under center, so you shouldn't be looking at him as a wide receiver 1 and saying, I have to play him. Look at him as a wide receiver 2 and see who else you have and how their matchups are and pick them accordingly. As far as the running game for the Panthers, it's going to be confusing this week because Isaiah Crowell is banged up, and then you got Terrence West, who just isn't as productive as he should be when he's given a start. So my advice is avoid both if you can. If you're in a tough situation and you've got to pick one, then follow the report, see how Isaiah Crowell does health-wise. He seems to be the lead running back, even though he didn't get the start last week. But otherwise, avoid these two. In the Browns' defense, you can look at him as a high DST2. I don't think it's going to be a good time to play him, but that's how you view him. Panthers at home, they also look like a team that could win that last game and make a fight for the playoffs, Keith.
The Detroit Lions travel to the Chicago Bears. The Bears in turmoil. Jay Cutler is now benched in favor of Jimmy Clausen, so rush out on your waiver wire and pick up Jimmy Clausen. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Do not do that unless you're the guy playing me in my championship game. Then you go do that. No, the good news about the Bears benching Cutler is that it didn't change my pick at all. I'm still going to pick the Lions here, but just one little stat note. The Bears, for all of their offensive woes, are still averaging on the season a point more per game than the Detroit Lions. Just wrap your brain around that, folks. Matt Stafford, Calvin Johnson, I know he's been injured for part of the year, You know what I mean? Just wrap your brain around that. The problem with the Bears is their defense. They're averaging almost 30 points allowed per game. 30. I said 30 points allowed per game. Just simply atrocious. Detroit's defense is too good. There's just no other. Even if Cutler was playing, even if Brandon Marshall was playing, I'd still be picking Detroit in this game. Lions, it is.
Yeah. Interestingly, Keith, when I looked at the last game that they played, I think it was back in week 13. The Bears weren't bad at the beginning of the game, and they fell apart. Jay Cutler had 200-plus yards passing and a couple of TDs, but apparently staff's going to take a look at the talent they got and, I suppose, evaluate them for next year. Anyway.
They should start David Fales then.
Yeah, they should start David Fales. Anyway, all right, enough of that. For the Lions, they're going to win this game. They're going up against the Bears, who have allowed the most TDs in the NFL. Must-starts Matt Stafford, Joy Bell, Calvin Johnson, Golden Tate, Lions defense and special teams. Start them all. Expect great games from them. I'm so happy I took Calvin Johnson with my first pick, and he's back to form. He should be, and I'm crossing my fingers he's going to bring me to championships. For the Bears, wow, with the start of Jimmy Clausen, sort of throws up a question mark on all their quality players like Matt Forte, Alshon Jeffrey, Martellus Bennett. Bennett out of the three is probably a player that you should still start. More than likely, if you have him as your tight end, he's been carrying you most of the season, so you've been living with his good games and his bad, and you're still where you are. So I think you have to start him. If you happen to have a better tight end than him, maybe you're lucky and have Antonio Gates. Obviously, you start Antonio Gates over him. As far as Jeffrey and Forte, I think with Jeffrey, you downgrade him to a wide receiver too. I mean, he's the kind of player that if Clausen just throws him some jump balls, he should be able to pull down the receptions. And for Matt Forte, they're going to have to come run heavy this game. I mean, with Jimmy Clausen under center, I don't know what their passing game's going to look like. The only downside is that this is a tough Lions rush defense, but so be it. They are the cards that they have been dealt. Lions win one on the road.
The Baltimore Ravens travel to the Houston Texans. The Ravens are sitting at 9-5. One of the criticisms that I have of the Ravens is that they haven't really beaten anybody. I think all but one of their wins have come from suspect teams, come against suspect teams. The Texans sitting at 7-7, a game that they probably could have won. They're at home, and my gut says to pick the Texans, but I know I'm going to regret that because of their quarterback situation. They're probably going to end up with Case Keenum or Thad Lewis. Both of those guys in backup roles for their other teams last year won a game or two. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, folks, but the Ravens don't wow me for whatever reason. They just don't. And I'm going to pick the home team on here for an upset. I'm going to pick the Texans.
Okay, you do that, Keith. Hey, I got the Ravens in this one. Keith, I have to give you a hard time. Come on,
that's okay. It's because when I need to start doing this more when I make my pick. Try to get the kids behind me to build up momentum.
You get the kids behind you. Look, I like the Ravens on the road here because of the Texans' quarterback issues. Plus the Ravens, I mean, they still have one of the top defenses in the league, and add to that a rookie, and I think it just makes for a crazy good day for the Ravens defense. You start him if you got him. Joe Flacco is actually a borderline QB1 this week. I wouldn't play him over the people I've ranked ahead of him, but if for some bizarre reason Cam Newton was your main quarterback, you can always bench him and put Joe in. That would be sort of an obvious substitution. But if you are where you are, I don't think Cam Newton's your number one quarterback. Justin Forsett, he is certainly an RB1 this week. Against the Texans, despite the matchup. Torrey Smith, wide receiver 2, he actually could excel this week. Steve Smith, I think I have him as a wide receiver 3, and I have him sort of, he's not a must-play. If you have him, you don't have to play him, but you can view him as a wide receiver 3 with whoever else you have as a wide receiver 3. For the Texans, Arian Foster remains a must-start, even though the Ravens are number 1 against the rush. He's just too quintessentially involved in that offense, and is going to get enough touches to be worthwhile. And besides that, the man runs like silk. I just have a hard time seeing the Ravens shut him down. I like DeAndre Hopkins as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, because you got to throw to somebody, and he's going to be the man. Andre Johnson is a wide receiver 3 consideration, but certainly not a must-play. The Texans, I think this is a week that they actually could struggle. and I'm having a difficult time viewing them as a must-play this week, particularly against an offense that does a great job protecting the football. So you can avoid them if you have one of the better options that we list at thefantasygreek.com. Ravens on the road, Keith.
The Minnesota Vikings travel to the Miami Dolphins. The Vikings 6-8, the Dolphins 7-7, but these teams are probably more even keeled than anyone would have thought coming into the season. If you would have told me that the Vikings would eventually go to a rookie quarterback, lose Adrian Peterson, and still look like something resembling an NFL team, I kind of would have laughed in your face. But you know what? They're playing well of late. Lost 16-14 to the Lions last week. They beat the Jets 30-24 in overtime. They beat the Panthers 31-13 the week before. Lost by 3 to Green Bay. Lost by 8 to Chicago. Won by 3 to Washington. They are fighting. They are fighting, I tell you. I'm still picking the Dolphins.
It's so sad.
I know. I still like Ryan Tannehill. I know that they've floundered as of late. I think they have the better defense. They're at home. That's enough for me. I'm picking the Dolphins.
Yeah, I'll join in that sadness and agree with you and take the Dolphins at home. Look, it's Teddy Bridgewater, rookie quarterback, against a Dolphins defense which you could say that it's a little nicked up, a little banged up. It's still the Dolphins defense, and they're at home. I think they've got something to prove in terms of next season. Regardless of what their head coaching situation is, there's enough players with pride on that team that are going to want out and go play some smash mouth football, and I think we're going to see a lot of that. That having been said, the Vikings, there's only one real player that I think you could even look to in fantasy football if he's even on your roster, and that's Charles Johnson. He's just been very consistent. I can see him being 75 to 100 yards receiving and possibly 1 TD. But again, he is not a must-play this week. You don't have to play him if you have him, especially if you've got 3 other better wide receivers, and unless a flex play. Oh, let me comment on that to everybody. For this week, if it's a close call between a running back and a wide receiver, go with the wide receiver. Wide receivers have a little bit more upside this season than the running backs do, especially in the matchups this week. Just use that if it's becoming one of those situations you're tearing your hair out, you don't know what to do, go with the wide receiver. For the Dolphins, I like Lamar Miller as an RB2. This is a Vikings defense giving up roughly 125 yards on the ground. The only question is whether they're going to give up a touchdown to him. Mike Wallace is a wide receiver 2/3. I think he's startable this week. I would lean towards starting him compared to saying you don't have to play him. He's a player that you could look to get into your lineup. Jarvis Landry, he's a wide receiver 3, and again, that just depends what your other options are. Dolphins at home, Keith.
The Atlanta Falcons travel to the New Orleans Saints. 5-9 Falcons, 6-8 Saints. The Saints defense looked rejuvenated last Monday night, but then again, they were playing the Bears. They are the cure-all for anybody's defensive woes. Neither one of these teams feels any kind of impetus to stop the other team from scoring. Usually, 26.4 per game for the Atlanta defense, 26.7 for the Saints defense. The question is do you believe that the Falcons can go into New Orleans, play in the Dome in a division game where, believe it or not, they're still fighting for a division title at 5-9 and 6-8, and stop the Saints offense? I personally do not. I'm going to pick the Saints here.
I'm taking the Saints too at home. They're just playing really good football right now, and I see more of what we saw in week 1. It's going to be a game with a lot of fantasy points out there, lots of options for you in fantasy if you have any of these players on your roster. Matt Ryan, he's a must-start for me if you have him. This is just too good of a matchup against the Saints team, giving up close to 260 yards per game and 1 to 2 TDs, passing TDs per week. Matt Ryan just blew it up last time against them, 400-plus yards passing, 3 TDs back in week 1. And it doesn't matter what their wide receiving situation is. For example, both Julio Jones and Roddy White have showed up on injury reports. Whether one or both aren't available is very much in question. And if they don't play, I still like Matt Ryan to have just a great day for you through Harry Douglas, Devin Hester, Levine Toil-Olo, and Steven Jackson. He's going to put the ball up in the air, and he's going to put the ball up in the air to his people. So go ahead and start Matt Ryan. Look at Steven Jackson. He's a solid RB2 this week. If Julio Jones plays, I would be cautious. I never like when the Falcons put injured players out on the field. You never can really tell whether or not they're a decoy. And I mean, if you can